Hello and welcome back to the Chelmsford News Show. I'm Tom Christiano. Well, I'm looking forward to this show very much because it's our post-election analysis show after the elections which were held this past Tuesday on November 8th. And I have two experienced politicos on the show today. Joe Reddy, my friend Joe Reddy, who's been on the show many times. How are you, Joe?
I am well. Thank you for having me on, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. And one reason I invited you and Glenn Thoren on the show today is because you both don't mind expressing your opinions, which is what I like to see. And on a show like this, I want the opinions to come out, especially when we do part two, which will be the national elections, you know, talking about the presidents and people who might run for president, U.S. congresspersons, governors, all that stuff. So we'll have a lot of time to express our real opinions on that pretty soon. And so Joe is a town meeting representative here in Chelmsford and a longtime political person. Are you on some other committees in town now, Joe?
I just finished up working the master plan committee in Chelmsford, and so
nice.
That was my last stint. That's actually finished now. So I'm just a town meeting rep and just your average local citizen.
And a very successful realtor, right?
Yeah, we have a real estate
Ready
business.
Real estate?
Yeah, right in the center of town, Ready Real Estate, and interesting time in the real estate market.
Yes.
So.
If we have time later on, at the end of our second show, we'll talk about real estate, okay?
Yeah, I'm sure
Because I want to make sure we get
intertwine into national politics right there, too. So.
Yes, yeah. Well, thanks for being here, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
And we also have my friend Glenn Thoren with us tonight. How are you, Glenn?
It's good to be here, Tom.
Glenn is also very active in politics. Glenn leans a little more right, you might say, and Joe leans a little more left.
You could say that.
And I'm an independent, I'd say in the middle. And because I'll talk about that later, you'll hear about the candidates I like and support on both sides. So Glenn also is a town meeting rep, right, Glenn?
Since 1989. Precinct 7 now.
7 now,
So
yeah,
I've
and
been
Joe's
here,
8.
Been here since it started.
I know, with the with our representative town meeting, 1989.
1989. And before that, when we had open town meetings and everybody
Used to
was
go.
yelling around, yelling at people.
Yep.
You know.
You and your wife, Evelyn,
That's
very
right.
involved, who's a longtime school committee
6
member,
terms.
very active in town as well. And so thank you both for all that you do in town and being active and being interested in politics. I
didn't know he was on the master plan committee. I should have known that because I'm on the master plan implementation committee.
Oh, good.
So what if we'll figure this thing out and you'll get some phone calls.
What were you thinking?
Well, we're going to do this post-election analysis show in two parts. Part one will be the local and state elections. I believe if we have time, we'll get into the national, but we'll probably wait until the second part, the second 30-minute show, to cover the national politics. Senate races, congresspersons races, governors races, and the implications nationally for presidency in 2024, et cetera. So I thought we'd start with our local congressperson, Lori Trahan's race. She won her race. She received 63.3% of the vote, running against Dean Tran at 36.7% of the vote. So she defeated him by quite a margin. And this is with 89% reporting thus far. So there's going to be a few more votes coming in. But she won by a huge margin.
That won't change much. That won't
Glenn,
change.
shall we start with you, Glenn? What do you think about this?
Well, if you look down the state races and go down into the local level here, you'll see it's 63 to 65% versus low 30s to mid 30s all across the board almost. So if something deviates from that, there must have been some other feature or other factor in the decision-making process because it's very, very consistent throughout the state in the 65-35 type range. So Lori has done a lot of good things because she talks to a lot of her constituents. She's out there. Yes. And that's very important because a lot of people that run for office, they get the office, and I won't call it hiding, but they're tough to find.
Yeah.
So they're either at their offices or someplace else, and they have their staffers handle all the interface with the public. But Lori, to her credit, is out there talking to people. Yes. And she's easy to talk to, as I'm sure you know. I've spoken to her, you've spoken to her. So I expected her to do well. She did well, and this is clearly a deep, deep blue state. So, if you're a Democrat, you've already got a 10 or 15 point advantage in most cases.
Oh, yes. we were lucky. We had a Republican governor for 8 years, right?
Well, sort
And
of,
he was a
sort
moderate.
of, sort of Republican.
Yeah, he was a
government.
moderate though, which I
Yeah.
think is a perfect kind of
Yeah.
Republican. So, but he did very well. Charlie Baker
Charlie.
decided not to run again this year, which we'll talk about later. And Joe, any of your thoughts about Lori and
So
the
all
Republic-
politics is local, and I think one of the things that Trahan has done well is that she's brought a lot of resources to the local level. You can see the Chelmsford school systems have been the beneficiary of money that Lori's been able to secure. She's been focused on infrastructure, bringing money here to the greater Lowell. And I think she recognizes that that's really what her constituents want her to do. You know, she's not up on the national level. You don't see her making waves on issues that don't really help the ground level. And I think that's kind of something that we appreciate here personally. You know, there's a rhetoric up there that you can certainly be on CNN or Fox News every day if you wanted to, but is that really helping people in Chelmsford, Lowell, Drake-it, right? She understands. She gets that, you know, this area needs needs to be serviced, and she's done a good job with that. So I think voters in that respect came back and offered it to her. The other thing, too, is that the timing of the indictment on Dean Tran was not good for him personally. I don't really love when those things come out in the middle of an election cycle.
What a coincidence.
It seemed ill-timed. I'm not. I'll let the process play itself out. But as a general voter, I don't like when those things impact the election because they seem a little off. But I still think she would have won handedly, truthfully.
Absolutely, she would have won. One of the things that we seem to be missing in the town with both the representatives to the federal government and representatives to the state government is how do we know that they're accountable? So you never hear much discussion about, like what you said about Lori bringing resources into the area. She needs to be, it needs to be known to the town people, what did she do to help Chelmsford in particular? Because this is a Chelmsford show and we're from Chelmsford, so being able to understand what our local representatives to the state government, what the federal representatives actually bring in to help Chelmsford versus Lowell. Lowell gets lots of money from all over the place. They have an entirely different situation. But what about, Chelmsford and Drake-it and Westford? What are we getting for the representation that we have? We'll talk about this some more, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you. Well, I agree with Lori Trahan being, I think, a very good congresswoman. I think she's doing a great job. What is she heading into her 5th year now? She served 2 terms, I think. Maybe this was her 3rd election.
This will be her 3rd term, yeah.
And I remember before she became a congressperson, how nice she was at the Chelmsford Library. I met her, and she was just going around introducing herself to everybody. And somebody from Chelmsford kept talking to her, wouldn't let her go. And Lori was so nice. I'll never forget that. She didn't brush her aside, say, I gotta go. You know how a lot of politicians are.
Yes,
I have 5 seconds for you, and that's it. And so she's just a very nice person.
She relates well to the
She's been on my show, too, when I interviewed her. She's very nice to me. She sends me a Christmas card, too, every year, which I love. But she said 510 public events. This is one of her mailings. 510 public events, and this was a couple of months ago. It's like every day I see her picture in the Lowell Sun about over at this place in Lowell, this place in Chelmsford, this place here, there. Really representing the town very well, I think. And that's when she's not in Washington, D.C., of course. So anyway, that was good news, I think, that she won from my perspective.
She'll be fine.
I thought, you may know our state senator was unopposed, Michael Barrett. So there were even no returns for no votes were shown in the state because it just said, unopposed. So
I actually wrote myself in against him, so he was opposed by me.
Okay, that's
I
interesting.
didn't see you in the vote.
He did beat me, whatever it was.
Yeah,
the
it says
one.
all others, 276. So you were one of those, Joe.
Yeah,
But he
unfortunately.
did get almost 11,000 votes here in Chelmsford. So he got quite a few.
I almost always write myself in if somebody's unopposed.
Nice.
Yeah, just
nice.
for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should do that.
So if you're the town clerk and you're going through and you're counting the ballots, you'd be like, oh, that was.
Oh, there's Joe Reddy.
That's
and-
Joe
That's a
Reddy's
good
ballot.
idea, Joe. Well, the first state representative race that I thought we'd talk about, and Joe supported the winner here, Rodney Elliott. Rodney Elliott, the Democratic candidate, won with 65.3% of the vote, and his opponent was Cara Miller, getting 34.7% of the vote. And this isn't, all the votes aren't in yet, but it's close. So anyway, Rodney Elliott won by quite a bit. Another Democrat-Republican
65-35,
situation.
Deep blue state.
Yeah. So any thoughts on this one?
So Rodney took over the Tom Golden district. Tom, I thought, was a great state representative for us. Rodney obviously came in. He was former mayor of Lowell and all those accolades, and he had a deep network of people, which is hard to usurp, right? So as long as he was able to take Chelmsford, he was going to win that election. Carla Miller is actually another realtor, and she's actually a phenomenal person. Probably would have done a great job, but I think when you're trying to run a race from Chelmsford in some of these districts where they've, unfortunately, and this is just how I feel about it, even though I'm a Democrat, I feel like they've gerrymandered the state to a certain degree, and a lot of it was back during those Speaker Finneran, was that?
That's right.
So Speaker Finneran, who did time for all of this, his whole entire philosophy was really keeping urban legislators in power. That's why you get people from Lowell they're just hard to beat, because if you run somebody from Chelmsford, you just don't have enough precincts. You can see the vote totals. So I do.
Look at the way Chelmsford's split up. They split us up after Carol Clevin left office.
It's not right.
To make sure Chelmsford never had a Chelmsford person representing Chelmsford. That was done deliberately. That's the gerrymandering, and again, it's not right. But until state government changes in a way I can't predict yet, that'll never change. And we'll never have full representation, even though everybody says, oh yeah, we're taking your story into the State House. What I'm looking for is, how do we compare to the other places you represent? If we're getting at least, I hate to use the term, our fair share of the resources that we're asking for, maybe not so bad, but I haven't seen that yet.
So the big issue is, and the Thorens have always been big into education, and his wife Evelyn has been on the school committee and done all this stuff, and they've been big advocates. It really comes down to funding, right? Like Chapter 70 funding, and how your schools are going to get resources, which impacts how taxes are allocated throughout the town. So I mean, there's so many reasons why you really need your own rep, because if somebody from Lowell, or even take Jim Arciero, we'll get into him, but he represents really Westford and a small portion of Chelmsford, he's not going to change the underlying formula for Chelmsford and impact his core constituency coming out of Westford.
They get millions of dollars more per year for education than we get.
And why
sick. Would that be? Because it makes no sense. You look at the two towns, you compare their populations, their incomes. It's really hard to justify why Westford is getting millions more than Chelmsford is. We have the same needs. We have a very similar demographic that Westford has, but they have the representative. We don't.
Yes. Well, speaking of Jim Arciero, he is a representative from the 2nd Middlesex District. He's been one of our state reps for over 10 years now, a long time. I remember doing a debate with him and Pat Wojcik when he first ran. It was, and he won that race, of course. But so he's been doing well, now rising in the leadership ranks in the State House. So he won with 64.8% of the vote. And Raymond Z, XIE,
predictable.
received 35.2%, that same kind of ratio.
There you go.
And the precincts in Chelmsford that Jim represents are 3B, 4, and 5A. So 3 precincts and partial precincts in Chelmsford. And then Westford, all of Westford, I believe, and parts of Littleton in there. So what do you think about that race with Jim Arciero and Ray Lee? Or Z.
I liked Raymond's ads. Yeah, he was really it seemed like an interesting candidate, truthfully.
But TV ads or what?
Yeah, he had put out a Facebook ad. It was but it was like a TV ad, and he clearly cared about Chelmsford.
Just walking through the playground or something like that.
Yeah, and I think he's actually connected to the church there on the corner of 110 and Hunt Road. But he seemed like a really, really nice guy. The problem is that Jim Arciero's been around for a long time, and he's done the grassroots efforts that he needs to do, and he stays connected to the people that he knows are going to be active in politics, and I think he does take people's opinions into account. So when a politician does that, it's hard to take him out. I find just in general it's hard to beat incumbents that have been in for a long time. You got to really put together a phenomenal ground game just to make any sort of inroads. So.
Jim was always accessible, as opposed to some other people who I won't name. But if you wanted to get connected with Jim for a visit to the State House or something else that was going on, you could get him.
Yes.
And we've been to numerous campaign parties. We've contributed to his campaign because he used to represent what was Precinct 5. Now we're Precinct 7, and he doesn't represent us anymore. Simon does. And so he was very accessible. So from that point of view, he helped. But the things like the education funding and other issues that impact us directly never changed much. So, you need the whole state to do that. So Jim can't do it. The question is, what can you do?
Yes, yeah. And I know Jim has been on my show many times, though, and I
Good
know
guy.
very well.
Very
He
good
works hard. He's very conscientious. I've gone to a lot of his campaign parties and Christmas parties, and he's very politically active. I mean, he really cares about this stuff, as they all do, I must say. So Jim really had a good showing there. Congrats, Jim. And next, why don't we go on to the race in the 14th Middlesex District for state representative. Simon Cataldo won, this time with a little bit higher, 72.8%. And from Chelmsford, Rodney Cleaves ran, and he won 27.2% of the vote. So, and this district represents 5 precincts in Chelmsford, 7 through 11, parts of Concord, parts of Acton, and all of Carlisle. So it's dispersed through some pretty nice towns there, Concord and Carlisle,
Nice
Acton and
neighborhoods.
Chelmsford.
Nice neighborhoods.
Yes, so
That's probably the one rep seat that you could probably win out of Chelmsford now. It's
Because there's
actually
so many,
it's
yeah.
cut enough that I think it gives an edge to each town depending on
Yeah.
how it is. But Simon going into that race was just far better funded.
Yeah.
He had run a very competitive race against several other Democrats in the primary, and so he had already built up a huge base of supporters coming in as a Republican.
Yeah.
At that point, if you haven't already run a competitive race, and Rodney, I don't think had to actually compete against anybody to take that spot.
And he wasn't a well-known name either. I mean, he's a town meeting rep, so we see him at town meeting. But Simon, I was talking to Joe a little bit before we started here. I got numerous mailers from Simon. I mean, the big mailers like these,
Yeah,
sure. And I must have got half a dozen. You said you probably got 20.
Yeah, I got at least 20. He got endorsed by so many unions statewide. I mean, one of the things I didn't appreciate about that, though, is in the primary for him, you had unions coming out. Like, for instance, my wife's part of the nurses union. The MNA came out and did a whole mailing for him. I don't know how that helps, precinct 8 in Chelmsford, okay? They're more interested in how he's going to, do business for them on the state level, right? So they're funding these campaigns, but they're actually really impacting how we think as general residents, right? Oh, I keep seeing the Simon mailing. So I got another one from this union. Oh, I got another one from this union. And so it starts to kind of add up in the end. I think probably better once you get to the actual general, which is obviously what we've done now. But
Yeah.
I think in those
Name recognition
primaries,
is important.
It is huge.
And Simon showed up at a lot of the local political
He was
events
very
in town.
active, yeah.
He knew that Chelmsford had a lot of voting power in his election, so he wanted to make sure that when a selectman or somebody else was having a party, he was there. So he's well connected, and he showed up, and he talked to everybody he could.
Yes.
I talked to him at a couple different campaign parties, so he was making himself available. Now that he's won, he's going to have to do the work. So, hopefully, like Jim Arciero is available, when you call him, you can get him.
Yeah.
You can take an issue to him. You can take it to whatever committee is necessary to get some feedback, and he'll get you the feedback. We'll see. But he certainly, he did come across well, and he promised to have that connectivity that other people that we know and have worked with have had before.
yes. And I first met Simon when he was running in the primary. I had never met him before. And I think he ran the best campaign that I've ever seen. And in my personal opinion, he came from not knowing anybody in Chelmsford to knowing the whole town. He came on my show for 2 30-minute shows before the general election for for 30 minutes. Simon and I got to know him a lot. And then I hosted one of the 2 debates between him and his Republican challenger. And he did very well in every one of those appearances. And he was also very nice to his Republican challenger, too. He's not a mean-spirited candidate by any means. In fact, I think he's the friendliest candidate I've ever seen.
So that we all learn something, when you say he ran the best campaign you've ever seen,
Yes.
he came on your show, that's clearly running the best campaign.
Yeah. Oh, a lot do, though. No, but what he did was beyond that.
I know. And he was good in the debate. What else did he do, Tom, so we can
Well, I'll tell you how
pick up on that?
I think a lot of politicians make a mistake when they don't do much on Facebook. Facebook is a very active social media. We have Chelmsford News group there and Chelmsford Town Talk. Chelmsford News has over 17,000 subscribers. Most of them live in Chelmsford. If you were a thinking candidate, you're going to say, I'm going to post things on Chelmsford News and I'm going to be involved or friends, Facebook friends with those who are leaders of the community. And that's what happened with me.
Social media.
We became Facebook friends. And a lot of our local politicians are not really active on Facebook, from what I could see, and don't communicate with you, don't give you thumbs up. So he would give me many thumbs up. He would reply always to my emails, to my messages to him very promptly. He even sent me some handwritten postcards saying thank you for this or thank you for that. I mean, that to me is a perfect candidate, in my opinion, but also about the issues too. But go ahead.
But the point is that he actually reached out to every single person that's an active member in the Chelmsford community.
Yeah.
Rodney Cleaves has never talked to me, never called me. I mean, there's a point you can't win that way. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You got to show up to these events.
He's not on Facebook either, Joe. And Rodney, I did speak to him on the phone because I had him on the show, a couple of times. And so I spoke to him on the phone, but not being on Facebook is really detrimental to the candidates. Even national candidates are all over Facebook and maybe Twitter.
This is very important because years ago, I ran Bill Dalton's campaigns.
Yeah.
In the early campaigns, nobody expected him to win, but we used every media available.
Good.
We used television, we used radio. Nobody else was doing that. And so being able to get out there and be visible and meet people, now the social media makes that even more possible. It's more work.
And it's free, too.
Well, it's interactive, too, right? Like, at the end of the day, you feel like you're more heard, right? The problem with, some of these things, like the mailing, it's a one-way advertisement, right? Yeah, you're getting your message out there, but you're not getting the feedback. Like, he was great. I mean, he showed up to town meetings. He showed up to basic events. I mean, if somebody was running something in the common, it could just be like, farmer's market. He was there, right? Juneteenth Day. It just kept going on and on and on. He was at every event that you could think of.
At that Halloween dog.
Almost to the point where you're like, do you live in Chelmsford now, right? Like if you can make that kind of presence, you can win elections.
He was amazing.
That makes a huge difference because we've basically had 2 town managers since I've been in town. One didn't show up for much, and Paul Cohen showed up for practically everything.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of people that thought he lived in town because every time there was an event, Paul Cohen was there as a town manager. He doesn't have to come to these events, but he did.
Yeah.
So in regard to what it takes to connect with people, being there is a big deal.
Yes. And then, Joe, and I'll just mention the mailings. This is one example of Simon's mailings. I think I counted them. I received 10 mailings through the primary and the general election from Simon. And these aren't inexpensive. And he says, I'll always have your back. And then he has a nice picture of himself.
That's good work.
With his wife.
That's good work. Yeah.
And 2 children with a 3rd child on the way. So I thought he was a perfect candidate. And I said this to Simon, and I think it's true, but you may disagree with me. I think he has a future going up the ladder in state politics, maybe running for governor someday, lieutenant governor first, maybe governor.
He's a young guy.
Maybe a Congress if Lori ever leaves or something, or Senate. I think he has a perfect candidate with his resume, which we don't have time to go into now, but he has an amazing resume for a candidate.
Well, he's got 4 of the biggest union endorsements you can have. Mass Teachers Union. Mass
Tom,
Nurses.
you should have him on your show again sometime.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying.
No, I know. So we got to move on. But Simon, congratulations, Simon, and to all these candidates who won and all who ran. You all did a great job trying to be our state representatives, right? I think we'll all agree
Yeah,
on that.
we'll be watching you.
Yeah.
We'll be watching you.
We'll be watching, but I'm confident Simon and the others are going to do a great job for us. Well, why don't we go into, we don't have much time, but for the 4 ballot questions.
Oh, yes.
The first one, Glenn and I have a lot to talk about, which is the raising the income tax for those who make over $1 million per year here in Massachusetts from 5%, which we all pay, to 9%, which is an 80% increase on those who make more than $1 million a year. So that additional amount would apply to from $1,001 to whatever it is. And I understand we have a number of people in that category here in Massachusetts. You know, hundreds, they're expecting to raise billions of dollars in this. So any thoughts about this question 1? Let me just say, it won by 52% to 48%. It was very close. So if this actually follows through with it, all these multimillionaires are going to be taxed a lot more, it looks
Well,
like.
so will small businesses and others. And I have a basic opposition to raising taxes like this in general because it puts more pressure on people making profit, you know, which is good because they create jobs.
Yes.
You know, and when the state promises to, well, we're going to put this into education, we're going to put this into, you know, transportation, some other area like that, don't believe them because they told you that about the lottery. The lottery is going to go back to the cities and towns. When they found out how successful it was, they said, well, no, we're going to cap it. And the rest we'll just do with what we want.
Yeah.
You know, and so that kind of stuff drives me nuts.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to be able to believe your government when they say they're going to be using it for education. You know, right now I don't believe them until I see it, but I also think you shouldn't be raising taxes.
Yes.
People will leave the state because of that.
Yes.
I was actually disappointed in that. I think it's going to have unintended consequences. You're going to have business owners, small business owners, they're going to leave the state. They're going to go up to New Hampshire. They're going to go
That's
other
right.
places. Those jobs will go with it. I don't know if you've ever driven, you know, 101 in New Hampshire, but every retail place is completely packed full, right? You come down to Massachusetts, you got open spaces all over the place. There's a reason for that,
Yes.
you know, and there's jobs and things that are the consequence of it. So the other problem is, like, how do you arbitrarily decide 4%? Why don't we do 6? Why don't we do 8? You know,
10, 20.
You know, and want to just, you know, why should anybody making income over that amount even get any of it, right? Like, there's a point where you have to say to yourself, enough's enough. They already tax at 6% here in the state. I think it's enough. The other thing too is if you look at the vote totals, a lot of it's coming out of urban areas, right?
Cities,
Those where
yeah.
the cities
I
want the
went through
yes
every
because
town.
they're going to get all the money for education. The
Yes.
problem is when you live in Chelmsford, you get a little jaded. You go, we're not getting any of that money. It's not coming to our schools. It's going to
Yes.
go to Lowell. It's going to go to Lawrence. It's going to go to Boston. It's not coming to Chelmsford.
Yes.
If it was, I'd say, maybe the distribution of it is fair and equitable, so therefore maybe it's worth it. I don't see that happening. So I'm a little skeptical of how they're going to roll it out. I don't think they need the money, truthfully. They're already talking about how they're going to give money back to the taxpayers because they already have too much. We'll see how it rolls
So with your
out.
permission, Tom, jump to the last one because I think the dental stuff was...
Okay, just could I?
Sure, go ahead.
I want to give my comment on this one. We're in agreement here. I also voted no on this question number 1. I think it gives a tremendous incentive for these successful business people to move out of Massachusetts. It's one thing if this was national, right? You had no place to go within the United States, and otherwise you'll be taxed, right? Because it's national. But when you could go 15 minutes up and buy a beautiful home in New Hampshire with no income tax at all,
And no
so you
sales
not only
tax.
saved the extra 4, you saved the whole 9%, plus no sales tax. A very pro-business environment. A lot of these people, I think, as Joe was saying, and Glenn, are going to move out of Massachusetts. We're going to lose our entrepreneurs, our business start, and our very successful people. And so it was really, people think they're doing the right thing. Oh, let's tax them because they have millions of dollars. But I think it's going to backfire in the long run. It's not good for Massachusetts. So anyway, that's my, but
You're right.
You mentioned, well, how about number 2, the dental
Dental,
one?
yeah, they should spend the money on dental care and not just paying the dental,
Yeah, 'cause
dental
that-
companies.
Yeah, no one wants to see administrative people just...
So that one, on question number 2, 83% of the dental insurance premiums would go to patient dental care. Unfortunately, our time is running out here, and we have to end this. That won 71% versus 28% voted no. So I voted yes on that too, that I wanted to go to patient care. But the mailings I got, which I don't have time to go into, were so deceptive. Well, we're going to go to part number 2 soon, but thank you very much, Joe and Glenn, for those who are watching
Thank
just
you,
part
Tom.
1. Thank you for this very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
We have another part coming up. Ciao.